To start the recording. Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's doing well. Apologies for the delay. There was a lot of noise under my house, and we finally figured out a way to start. Good morning. Happy Republic Day to everybody. I hope you guys are having a good Republic Day. Usually, when I'm doing these lives, sometimes we'll have a watch along where we'll be watching a cricket match on the side. This time, I'm watching the Republic Day parade, and it's always absolute a lot of fun. So I'm going to keep doing that and making comments about what's happening. Dipesh Makwane says, Happy Australia Day. Oh, yeah, isn't it? Yeah, it is Australia Day as well. Happy Australia Day to you too, my friend. We conquered Australia also recently, so both countries are ours now. Happy Republic Day to Akhil Pisharodi Pidi, Boris Malhotra. Merry Christmas. Sure, whatever makes you happy, my friend. Someone I don't know makes the same joke. Merry Christmas, guys. Raghav Bhargav, Happy Independence Day. Happy Independence Day to all of you guys. Happy Independence Day. No? Happy, and even I got confused. Happy Republic Day. I hope you guys are doing good in life. I have been having a really interesting time. Finally got on stage last weekend. Was in Pune for 3 days doing shows. Very interesting. We had to restrict the audience down to like 15 per session, and it was still phenomenal. Last show was like a slightly bigger one at Spade Comedy Club. Just had a ball. Got a little self-indulgent at the end of it. I think I was scheduled to do about an hour, and I went on for 2 hours 37 minutes. By which time even the crowd was like, "Bhai, hamari bhi life hai. Jaane de abhi." And today itself, I'm doing another show on Republic Day. I'm doing a show in Mumbai. If you're in Mumbai, please come at 7 p.m. in Chembur. There's a place called Huddle. Very nice room. Again, restricted seating. So I think we probably have like, I think 5 tickets left. I put the link there, sorabpanth.com. Tours are going to be starting. A lot of people will be asking about Bangalore and a bunch of other places. Bangalore is going to happen in February itself. Goa should happen soon as well. And Delhi should also be announced shortly. And Mumbai, I'm going to be doing a lot of shows over the next couple of months. So yeah, lots of stuff coming up. Also, just have to say thanks to Sharda who donated money on Instamojo. Thanks a lot for that. Really appreciate it. And Sangeet as well on PayPal. Very kind of you people. Just a couple of more things I just have to announce before I bring on my very esteemed guest. Is that the show is now live on Anchor as a podcast. So please go out there and get that. I'm going to put the link for that as well. A lot of people have already subscribed, but please go ahead and subscribe to the audio version of the show. I'm literally doing it because you guys asked me to. In the audio version, what I tend to do is I do an intro and outro, which is not part of the main show. So that's the new thing that you guys can get there there as well. And there is a very small chance that over the next couple of months, I'm going to transition doing Wake Up with Sorabh to my second channel. So please go out there and subscribe to the second channel, because 2 months down the line, this channel is going to largely start having a lot of stand-up and live show releases. So there's a chance I'm going to switch over to the second channel for all wake ups. So please go out there and subscribe there. Lots of fun clips from Wake Up with Saurabh released there on a daily basis. So please go out there and subscribe to that. If you've never seen the show before, it's a very simple format. I bring on a guest, always somebody very interesting and somebody who's an expert at what they do. And sometimes I bring comedians who are pretending to be experts at everything. And today is no different. I have a gentleman who is an expert. He's got a very decorated career behind him in all fields. Very interesting gentleman. Please give a like right now before he begins so that more people tune in. The way the algorithms of YouTube work is that the more likes you give, the more people tune in. And I think this gentleman deserves a lot more people to be watching. So please give a like so that more people tune in. The format of the show is that I will talk to him and I will also take lots of questions from you guys. So if you have questions, you can put them in the YouTube comments, and priority is obviously given to Super Chat because that's how we make money. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys ready. Yes, everybody ready? Go. Yes, come on, let's do it. Ladies and gentlemen, very, very excited to introduce my very esteemed guest on this Republic Day episode. Please give a wonderful round of applause and everything in the chat for Captain Raghu Raman, everybody. Please proceed. Okay, let's see what the chat's saying.
Hey, Sorabh.
Hello, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about you?
All good. This is one of the first few sort of years that I've not been watching the Republic Day parade from the start. And the main reason for that is because I had to get my kids ready for the Republic Day celebration that is happening under my house. So, yeah.
So that's the banging you're hearing now.
Yeah. The banging I was hearing is reduced, and I was seeing my children enjoying a lot, and I enjoy a lot of the fanfare. I mean, it's
Fanfare
great
around.
fun. Yeah, except there is a lot of children who were singing very besura. Like that was one part which
Not
was, yeah.
not not to their parents. They don't sound besura to their parents. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Their parents are like, "Who's this nightingale?"
so parents always think the other kids are besura, not their own.
Yeah,
I
you have kids as well, right, sir?
I have two kids.
And very melodious singers, obviously.
Well, they don't sing in Republic Day at least. So,
By the way, I like your very nice bookshelf behind you. It's a wonderful bookshelf with all sorts of books.
well, what you're watching right now is an image of the bookshelf. It's not the actual bookshelf, but this is my bookshelf. So instead of putting a stock image, I actually took a picture of my bookshelf and put it out as the wallpaper.
See, I gotta give you credit once again for authenticity, because most people would just put up a random bookshelf. You've actually made the effort to take your own bookshelf's photograph.
Yeah,
That's
makes sense.
brilliant.
No, when you take a random bookshelf, even just looking at the book, titles, people can make out that it's probably not a genuine bookshelf. Here, you can even see वो keyboard का cover पड़ा हुआ है वहाँ पे, and
Uh,
it's a real bookshelf. It's not a fake one. But
yeah, I mean, they were, and also people have got into trouble also for putting the like their own bookshelf in the recent past.
why
Like
is
I think
that?
there's this one lady who was, I think, talking about something, and then I think one of the books behind was from some guy who was a Nazi propagandist or something like that. This
Yeah,
is in
but
the
that's fair.
US.
Maybe you want to read the other
Yeah,
point of view also. उसमें
that's
क्या है?
exactly my point as well. Precisely my point as well. Yeah.
And the fact, if you really are interested in any, sort of subject or strategy or even history for that matter, I mean, how can you read like India's history only from Indian historians' point of view? You have to read it from the point of view of other countries as well, third parties who are observing it neutrally and all of that. Only then you get a 360-degree picture, no? Even about people, how can you form a judgment about a person just hearing about that person, say from the person himself or herself, or from somebody, oh, aisa banda hai, ye hai, wo hai, and you need to hear it, you know, different views. So I guess there is no harm in having a book which people say, oh, how can you have Men Kampf in your, sort of shelf if you believe in empathy with the Holocaust or whatever. When you got to figure out what's the mind of the guy who did that.
Well, I was trying to read Mein Kampf ages back just to understand what this book was about, and it is such an awkward book to read on a train. So it was the first time in my life I created a cover, because I just don't want
Oh,
the
yeah.
awkward glances from people going like, "Look at this guy." So yeah, but I completely understand. I think, and you would specifically be the right person to ask this kind of question, because I was reading a lot of biographies and things in general of Indian prime ministers, and the kind of different perspectives that different historians bring to figures who you think you know everything about. And it's not like you believe all of it, you just like sort of combine all the resources and make your own opinion.
Yeah, but but at the end of the day, whether it's a prime minister, any leader for that matter, any leader
Right.
is also a human being. And like any human being, they'll have relatives, they'll have a lot of weaknesses and all of that. And of course, in leaders or in history for that matter, I mean, I often speak about this to college kids that when you're looking for a role model, create your image of the role model. Don't actually follow the real person, because the real person will eventually let you down, because the real person is a human, and at some point
Yeah.
of time the human will fail somewhere. And I think the classic example to illustrate this point is the story of Dronacharya, the greatest teacher, so to speak. Matter of fact, we even have an award called the Dronacharya award, which is awarded to the best coach. Now if you ask somebody who was Dronacharya's best student, the correct answer is Ekalavya, most talented student. But Ekalavya never learned directly from Dronacharya. Matter of fact, Drona told him, I can't teach you. And so he takes his, clay image, a role model. He makes a role model and he learns from that role model, observing the model from a distance. The real Dronacharya turned out to be a capitation fee professor, because he basically, for his own student to come first, he gets the most talented person out of the game. Or fixes the I mean, he is not loyal to the sport. He is loyal to his own prodigy. So that's why I think even when we are choosing role models or looking at biographies and all of that, I think we should keep this in mind, that they're human beings, and like any human beings, they'll have their weaknesses, their moments of all human faults.
Well, it's an interesting thing that I think I mean I don't know if this is specific to India, but I think it's specific to a lot of countries where we tend to deify people a lot. I don't think it's an India specific thing, and yeah, we tend to forget the fact that yeah, there were a lot of faults. Like even when you're reading about, say, we're talking about India becoming a republic and everything that preceded that, there were obviously mistakes made because there is human error in anything. Otherwise, history would not even exist.
You look at the chaos. When we talk about 1947, first
Yeah.
remove all internet, mobile phone, communication, regular telephones, remove all of that. All communication in this country at that point of time is happening through Morse code, signaling. I don't know if you're even old enough to remember the trunk call days, right? Not the STD days, but trunk call days, where to make one phone call, you normally had to book a call, and you said, I want to say talk to Coimbatore to inform somebody that someone here is dying or is dead. To make that call, you would probably ask for a lightning trunk call. And a lightning trunk call used to take about 2 hours to get booked, and cost the bomb. So in that environment, to administer a country, which is still not a country, by the way, it's all different states and different rajwadas, and some guy has a dream that I'll go to Pakistan, another guy thinks I will stay, like Nizam of Hyderabad, I'll stay in Hyderabad, but I'll have a corridor from here till Pakistan. I mean, these kind of flights of fancies, which to those rulers were not flights of fancies. After all, when you are a king or a sovereign who has power of life and death over your subjects from millennium, for them to imagine that they'll get what they want in that chaos, to be able to take decisions. Matter of fact, even the information that would come to you would be delayed by several days, if not weeks, and then you have to act on it. In that, just to imagine that even so much was done is, I think, incredible. I mean, hindsight, of course, we can say, "Aisa nahi, aisa karna chahiye tha." It's a bit like those not commentators, but the spectators who sit and watch this, 180 kilometers per hour ball coming towards Sorabh Pant. And isko na aisa khelna chahiye tha. You ask him, tu jaake dekh, pata lagega.
यार वो यॉर्कर को ना थोड़ा आगे 2 फुट आगे खड़ा होता है ना, स्ट्रेट ड्राइव मार सकता था छक्के के लिए. लाइक भाई तू घर में बैठ के क्या सोच रहा है?
Our man has never made it to the gully team. Forget about society के team में भी नहीं पहुंचा वो. लेकिन but that's the beauty of humankind, that we'll always have an opinion on things, and rightfully so, I guess. And I think that's also the reason why in the core principles of leadership, in hierarchy and leadership, organizational design, there is a necessity to make the leader a little bit of a deity. That's why you have to deify the leader, because otherwise the rank and file, if they start questioning every action of the leader, then there is no forward movement possible. That's why when you go to school, the teacher's supremacy over the class is taken and thrust upon you from day one. Teacher boss, and there is a certain ritual which goes with that. You'll all stand up when the teacher comes and the teacher tells you. Now that ritual is built in that organization to make sure that the students are able to absorb the information without questioning it at every stage. And of course, there's a fine balance. Once the student get that knowledge and they come up to a certain, masters and all of that, then they are taught again to question. That is why PhDs are usually in realms of questioning something and going into it. So I think it's necessary for leaders to be made into a little bit of a diet. Little is the key operational word here.
Yeah, I mean, and beyond question, also the thing is that I think way back then, when we were talking about the 1940s specifically, there was very little two-way communication. Like I think right now, everybody, at least for whatever it's worth, has their opportunity to express themselves on social media. Like one of my favorite stories that I have still not, I spoke to Ramchandra Guha about it, I've still not confirmed the story, but I believe it's a story that I read somewhere, which is that when India got our independence, there were a few villages that didn't know because of the lack of radios across the country. And it got to a point where
they put Queen Victoria or Queen
and I was like, this is a phenomenal story. But there's so much to unpack here, by the way. A lot of people who are tuning in right now, we have about 400 people watching, and please go ahead and Akshay Iyer says, Sorabh, he's taking a jibe at you. I don't know about what exactly you're talking, but
no intention. If I take a jibe at somebody, usually that person feels it. So
But sir, I think it'll be actually kind of interesting to. I think a lot of people who are tuning in are a little unaware of who you are and your background and everything, and it's a storied history, right? Like from wearing the uniform, then out of the uniform, all the rest of the stuff that you've done. Is it possible to just get a little bit of a sort of journey from you of where you've been and who you are, just so people, specifically younger people who are tuning in, have a slight idea?
So it's not that exceptional a story. Like many other thousands of officers or people who joined the army. I joined the army in 1986. 86, I joined the academy. I spent 18 months there and got commissioned 1987. From 87 to 98, I was in the army. I served initially in Punjab. 86, 87. 87 Punjab was still, things were winding down, but it was still a little bit tense. 92, 93, I was posted to the glacier, Siachen Glacier. Again, uh, it might sound as a great accomplishment, but more than 70% of the army has been to the glacier. So it's no big deal within the army. And even as I say that Siachen is a tough posting, there are many places which are equally, if not more tougher than Siachen. So that needs to be calibrated. Then I had a chance to be in a UN mission in Angola. And then I came back to India, and I was one of my last stints was in Ahmednagar, which is near Bombay, as you're aware, where we have a school for armored warfare, where young officers are trained on leadership, tactics, technology, and the others. And that was 1998. I left the army, joined the Mahindra Group. There used to be college. There is still a college called the Mahindra United World College. That's where I first joined for a few months, and then there was this company. Those days it was called Automart India. Nowadays it's called First Choice. You might have heard of it. It sells used cars and one of the leading brands in that space. It's a Mahindra Group company. So I joined that company as a CEO. Then another company called Mahindra Special Services Group that focused on information security. And finally, I was the CEO of the joint venture between Mahindra and British Aerospace. So that was my first corporate stint. 2008, if you remember, 2611 happened. And after 2611, project was created in the Ministry of Home, where I had joined that project. And I worked with that project for about 5 years, almost 5 years. And when that got over, I came back to the corporate sector. And this time I joined the Reliance Group, and I worked with Mukesh Bhai's side of the group for almost another 5 years. And about a year ago, I decided that, been there, done that, at least to my satisfaction. I mean, of course, there is no end to doing what you want to do, but I thought that I've had a fairly good taste of the corporate and the government and, sort of commercial enterprises, and decided that I wanted to take a sabbatical. I wanted to take a break, which I used to do anyways between assignments. I used to normally take about 6 months to sometimes a year's break to just figure out. So this break was intended to be a year, but then COVID came in, and so it's been stretched to about 2 years. And in this journey, I have been a writer. I used to write for newspapers and wrote a book, which was, as I call it myself, a lazy man's book, because it was a compendium of my articles that had come out in Mint over a 5-year period. And involved with a few other projects, fun projects, and that's about it in terms of my life's journey.
I mean, that's a tremendous life journey. I mean, if you ask me the same question, I would be like, hey, I have 105,000 subscribers on Instagram.
Well,
That's
you
the
still
whole
are much
cast.
younger. You still have much younger. You have no idea what's going to happen.
By the way, I mean, this is one of the questions that I'd written after having done due research. Just that you've worked with with Reliance as well as the government. So the question is, who has more money? Which of these organizations is better off right now?
Fortunately, in both the instances, I was never in the department which was concerned with the money. So I never had an idea. But I can tell you one thing for sure.
Yeah.
Both the departments, whenever I used to go to ask for funding, they say, "Hamare paas paisa nahi hai, paisa kam ho raha hai, kam karo, kam karo." So that, I think, is a universal truth for all organizations, that whenever you need money and you go for money, and I'm sure you've seen this in your own life. You go to any establishment or whatever, wherever, advertisers, you go to, bada scene kharab chal raha hai, Sorabh. So that is the universal truth. And I guess that's why they have money, because
Yeah.
they know how to husband those resources very carefully.
और वो फिर नाम अटका देते हैं, लाइक अरे ये तो 30% कम है, लाइक अरे ये नाम सुना है आपने, लाइक अरे चलो ठीक है यार, करना ही पड़ेगा अभी. एंड आई हैव, बाय द वे, just as you said, I have worked in shows which are indirectly funded by the government, and because they do sponsorships as well as work with Reliance, and it's absolutely correct. I think, in fact, I would say the government pays more.
What?
At least the shows. I'm just saying, if you work in HR or marketing in Reliance, please hire me. I'm willing to do for whatever amount you.
Well, I'm not in Reliance anymore, so you will have to talk to Reliance directly. But I guess, I mean, you have to be on their platform as well, right? I'm sure that Jio would be one of the major platforms that would have kind of boosted your reach as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think to that extent, the organization did make a big difference in the last 5 years. And I mean, I'm not just talking about, well, actually including you in many cases, I think, and I was just looking at it from a macro point of view, not because it's Jio or whatever. I was looking at how the access to broadband, and in the true sense, broadband internet. I mean, again, I'm telling you, you will not believe. You will believe, of course, when I'll tell you, you'll believe that there's a rotary phone, you'll believe, people will believe, but they will not be able to appreciate what that meant. I remember when I was in Mahindra College, that was in 1998. And to get a software called Visual Basic, which used to come in 6 discs, floppy disks, I would go 45 kilometers from the college to Pune, and I would go on a Sunday, so offices are closed and the download is not being, streamed away. And each floppy used to contain 1.4 MB. Now, 6 disks to download without breaking and all of that could take 1 day, could take 2 days. That was the, the trickle with which, and that is the story of India. I mean, you had to book a scooter and wait for 18 years in some cases, in the heyday of the 70s or whatever, and you book a flat and then you wait for your lottery to come. It was always that mindset of frugality. Most Indians my age have always grown up with the mindset of frugality, and which is true even now in most areas. And that's why you'll hear this conversation in mostly middle class and lower and lower homes. Pankha band karo, pankha kyun chal raha hai, bijli chal rahi hai, isko off karo. Why are we not finishing the food? Finish it. Do wasting this, that. Now, not realizing that whether the child eats the food or throws it away, the waste is the same, because once your appetite is satisfied, everything. As a matter of fact, if you throw it away, some ants will eat it. If you force it down someone's gullet, it's a complete waste. But that mindset of frugality, that complete each thing, pass on your textbooks to the next sibling and all of that. This created, I think, in Indians a psyche of not dreaming big. In many cases, the sentences sort of drummed into children's head is, spread your leg only up to the mattress, be within your means, don't do this, and never have a loan. And that mindset of fear, the mindset of don't overextend, don't overreach, look for stability rather than, I think the propensity of access to data. I'll tell you something very interesting. When Jio was initially launched and it was like announced it's going to be free, right? We saw like tons of people downloading stuff, and holding it in their phone, right? And it was hard to kind of tell them, hey, it's going to be there. Don't worry about it. You don't have to download it. But that it's like tomorrow is suddenly, I'm just making it up, but suddenly the government declares that petrol is free. From here onwards, petrol is free. You can imagine a lot of people rush in, isme bharlo. So it was almost that mindset of frugality turning into a mindset of abundance.
Yeah.
Now, when you turn into a mindset of abundance, you don't think, I'm assuming, also in terms of growth by now 20% or 30%, you're thinking in terms of growth, how do I double this? How do I double my subscriber outreach? I mean, like you were just mentioning, I was listening to you when you said that you got onto another platform where it's just the voice and all of that stuff. So you're looking in terms of sort of multiplication exponentially. And that only comes with the mindset of abundance. So to that extent, I think the organization has reshaped the way, not just in terms of giving opportunities, but in the way the younger population can even think. I was talking to someone the other day, just like you. I mean, you've got tons of subscribers. There's this woman somewhere who teaches how to stitch a blouse. Just YouTube a Sujata blouse, and she's got like a few million followers. And just imagine,
Wow.
yeah, not kidding. There is a young man I met. A friend of mine recently introduced me to him. The pre-COVID I'm talking about. Our man does reviews of mobile phones less than 2,000 rupees. Only reviews of those phones, 900 rupees. That man, when he walks in anywhere, people come up to him with a selfie. Ki, sir, aapka maine review deke phone kharida hai," and all of that. Now, he's not an engineer. He doesn't work for a big magazine. He doesn't have a platform like Gadget Guru or any such shit. But he has gone out there and made it happen. So I think all of this has been possible because somebody did something. So I guess.
See, this is why you're a very good team man, because this is your answer to talk about Reliance being good, which I agree. I think Jio is great. This is a great answer, sir. I admire you even more now.
I'm not saying that. I'm offering you a view.
No,
And
I
I'm
agree. I
saying
agree.
this
Yeah.
is a view you have to take a look at
Yeah.
in your larger worldview. Right? That's it.
I will tell you though, Geo, the impact of Geo was so interesting because we started doing shows at like smaller cities, and there was a period for about a year and a half because of the explosion of what Geo had caused. The ticket sales, for example, in Bhopal, just as an example, went up probably by about 250%. And I know because I did a show in Bhopal. The first show I did was about 100 odd people. Second show was like 350 immediately. I was like, oh, this something has happened. So
That's a 300, like threefold growth.
yeah,
Threefold growth.
completely.
And by
Uh,
the way, my
hmm,
take on it, and again, I'm not sort of advocating Reliance or Jio. And like I said, my job there did not require me to advocate. It just involved, risk management. But the point is, this is not a technology breakthrough.
yeah,
Jio wasn't the first mobile company to have come into the market. It is but some 18th one.
yeah,
So before that, you had everybody and their brother and sister who came in. None of them mainstreamed the future. Matter of fact, they all catered to the high ARPU customers. So most of the ads and all that would be, you can download this, you can do this, you can do ringtones, this tone, that tone. It was all high ARPU, high ARPU, high ARPU customers. This is the first company which came and said, whatever gigabyte you find in, Altamont Road or in Delhi, in say golf links, the same bandwidth you will find in Dharavi.
yeah.
Mainstreaming the future. That, to my mind, is a very different construct from saying a technology leader. They're not a technology leader. They
Yeah.
are, I think, mainstreaming the future leader, which is different. I think it's a different ballgame.
I
Anyway,
was I was talking to Amish Tripathi. I mean, this is just the last thing I'll say about Amish Tripathi is in London, and he was talking about the internet connection there, and he's like, dude, India internet is like we keep
better.
complaining about
Yeah,
disconnect हो गया. He's like और सस्ता है और faster भी है.
yeah.
And I'm like, अरे तू लंदन में बैठ के ये बोल रहा है मस्त है अच्छा है.
No, that's
Like,
true. Matter of fact, we
yeah,
jumped to, I think, the number 2 in the world, just behind the US, if I'm not wrong, or for a brief period, we were even number 1 in the world. We
yeah,
meaning India put
yeah,
together.
yeah. Okay, we have a few questions coming in. I'll just take a couple of questions. Super chats from Sabyasachi Roy, who says, reminder for Indian football podcast at the rating on Twitter. Oh, yeah, Sabyasachi, I will go through your tweets and I will definitely figure it out. I would love to talk to somebody from Indian football for sure. We have Tirth P, who says, Happy Republic Day, sir. How did you motivate discipline people under your command? I have a follow-up question to Tirth's question, which is related to the previous thing which you were talking about books. So I was talking to Lieutenant General H.S. Panag, and he basically mentioned that there was a particular book that he used to cite as an example to everyone who served under him. I've completely forgotten the name of the book now, but it was I've generally forgotten. But
Say that again. Just give me the gist of it. I'll tell you.
it was basically about a soldier going into war and some 1950s 1960s book that he had written. I can actually go through the book and find out right now because I'm pretty sure I've marked it.
General Panag had written the book.
Yeah, no, General Panag used to cite that as an
Like that.
inspiration for
Okay.
for
Okay.
people.
Okay.
And he used to tell everybody that, hey, read this because this is the book to inspire you, or whatever it is. So was there any such thing in your case that there was this one, not a book or even like a sort of go-to thing?
There hasn't been one, sort of. And I think, many people ask me, okay, can you tell me which is your favorite book? And I don't have a favorite book. It's like asking which is your favorite song. I don't have a favorite song. Just like songs have accompanied you in your life when you were kids. When we were kids, we used to listen to a different song. Then when we were in college, there is a whole genre of songs, which was the zeitgeist at that point of time, right? And those songs were interwoven into you, into your psyche. They built you. They remind you, even now in the song plays, it reminds you of a particular location where you heard it first. And also books are like that. I mean, you learn from I think that, to me, books have a very different construct. So for example, I would say that every educated literate person has a book inside them. So they want to write a book. You also at some point, या तो तुम सोचा होगा या किसी ने बताया, "ये सौरभ किताब क्यों नहीं लिखते?" This thought will appear. Out of the millions and millions and millions of people who have a book inside them, maybe 1 million will think about writing it. Maybe 100,000 would get down to, or maybe 10,000 would get down to actually writing it. Maybe then, one sec, my background is misbehaving.
We were talking about the books, and the books in your background are like, हमें दिखाना पड़ेगा
No,
कि
they
हम
came to
कौन
the
हैं.
foreground. They came to the foreground. So you say,
This happened very organically. Yeah.
it just happened. There you go. So out of those, few will get to a stage where they might find a publisher to print it. And we are talking about, mostly books. Self-printing has just begun about 5-10 years ago. But before that, bringing it to a stage when you can actually get it printed, a publisher prints it, and then it reaches the bookshelf. I don't think any book can be that, because that's the distillation process. Now, the point is, if from a book you get one idea, and just one idea, only one idea, that to my mind has earned its keep. I still remember there was a book that I picked up many years ago when I was in Mahindra Special Services Group, and one of my main tasks was to keep making pitches. I'll tell you the name of the book if I remember it. I think it was written by, anyway, it'll come back to me. Brilliant book, just about 80, 90 pages, 100 pages, with simple tips. One of the tips there, and I think the gentleman will endorse it, was how to make a voicemail, how to leave a voicemail. And this was the time, and it's not mobile phones voicemail, it's that, desk phone voicemail. And I'll tell you what the phraseology went. It said, and this is the live one that I did. I did it at 9:15 because it said that your voicemail, you should try and put around 9 to 9:25, so that when the person comes to office at around 9:30, they first see this light buzzing and click on that. So it should be at that time. And it should not be, some long, we leave it in the night or something like that. The message went like this. I introduced myself. My name is Captain Raghu Raman, very clearly, so that the person can, okay, many people will often, they'll just say that in that flow. Very clearly, dear Mr. Ram, it was to Mr. C.N. Ram, who was then the CTO of HDFC Bank. And I told him, dear Mr. Ram, I have a proposal for you, which will save you at least 5 crores a year. It will take me just 15 minutes to explain it to you. My office is about half an hour away from yours. Please do let me know when I can come. He called me like in 10 minutes time. And I've used this. And actually he said, and by the way, in the end it says, my number is 991,000, and give out the number in slow, deliberate, digit by digit, and then repeat it. So that if a person is looking to grab, they can actually write it down. Not like my number, nobody can ever call back. Now, this simple one lesson that I learned out of that book, I credit to a few crores worth of order book coming in, because it gets you that. That's just one fact out of one book. So I think books should not be treated as, oh, from this book, I have taken everything in my life is shaped around it and all of that. I don't think so. I think we should read them, absorb them, use them, cross-pollinate them. And yes, of course, General Panag himself is a very, very avid reader, one of the few generals who actually likes to read a lot and read rigor. There is reading of this, newsletters and pages of a website or in shorts and all of that stuff. But I don't think anything strategic can be done unless you do what is called deep work. Deep work means you have to read about one battle, about 8 or 9 different accounts of that battle to get to know what might have been happening there. Not listen to one anecdote, which is, oh, this is what happened in that battle, and then carry it as if that was the, ultimate aspect of it. So no, I don't have one book, but I do draw from various different sources.
I completely agree. By the way, a couple of people have put it correctly in the chat. Niranjan Pawar has said the book. It was Message to Garcia was the name of the book.
Yeah, Message to Garcia.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
Message to
one
Garcia
of the
was
books. One of the books, of course, which but there are many others. Many others. You sometimes you can just read the accounts of leaders in battle, and you will know what a good leader is and stuff like that. Uh,
I would actually love to know because I remember watching this interview with you and Ranveer, and you spoke about basically how the army dealt with the absolutely terrible crisis in 1984 was what inspired you to join the army. So connected to what you just asked, what you just mentioned right now, what is like post that? What has been like? Whether it could be somebody from the armed forces in whichever country or whatever that sort of inspired you either as a leader or just as a worker or whatever in whatever format.
so Saurabh, I genuinely believe that I believe this, that you can find more inspiration from leaders in and around you whom you touch and feel, your own commanding officer, your own company commander. You can be inspired by them and you can learn from them. By the way, you can even learn from bad commanding officers. You can learn what not to do,
Yeah.
which is often much easier, so yeah,
Yeah.
seriously.
Yeah.
So if I have to learn from, let's say, since you interviewed him, General Panag, I know him from many years. If I have to learn from him, I have to bloody get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, run 10 kilometers every day, do 100 push-ups and all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
But if I have to learn from, say, another person, let's not name it, doesn't really matter, who is abusive, who doesn't who disregards juniors views, or shuts them up, I just need to learn what not to do,
Yeah.
right? So you can learn from good bosses, good colleagues, bad colleagues. You can learn, I think one of the finest grooming lessons that happens as soon as you join the Pulton is from your company commander. I'll tell you, I had a company commander call, and this Subir Majumdar, he was a company commander of mine, and he became my CEO also later. And I know if he listens to this, he'll I hope he remembers the story. So when I joined the Pulton, one of the first jobs he gave to me was to write a court of inquiry. Now, court of inquiry has to be written whenever some things happen, big stuff, small stuff. So if a soldier loses an identity card, then court of inquiry has to be written because it's a
Right.
controlled item. Because that document can, sort of, if falls into the wrong hands, it can allow that person to access sensitive places and all of that. And identity card is like in the army, when I used to teach my young officers, I used to teach them very, very simply. You remember that saying that if wealth is gone, wealth is lost, nothing is lost, right? Health is
Right.
lost, something is lost. If I-card is lost, then everything is lost. So it was that sanctity.
Yeah.
So and those days, no computer and no typewriter. I mean, of course, usually officers wrote court of inquiry by hand. And I had to write it on a, clipboard, under which there is a ruled sheet, on top of which there is a blank fullscape sheet. And I had to write it with fountain pen. And it had to be some 10, and it's not such a big deal. If a guy says, I lost my I-card and I was in a river and the bus went down, drowned, and the luggage went away, it's lost. I mean, what can you do about it? You can give him some punishment for negligence or whatever, but that's about it. It's not like some murder mystery. So
Right.
I wrote about. Now, the thing is, with the fountain pen, when you write, you cannot have a single mistake in the page. So there is no whitener, straightener, no business of whitener. So if you make any mistake, you write that whole page again. But when you write with the whole page handwriting again, that last sentence will not come in line with the next page sometimes. So sometimes you have to compress it. So you know, no, this compression doesn't look good. Take it back. Now, the thing is, I must have written that code of inquiry at least about 8 to 10 times, again and again and again and again. And I was like, tearing my hair off. What body kind of company commander I got and all of that stuff. But many, many years later, it was almost like that karate kid. Remember that right hand this way, left hand this way, right hand. It was a sort of a grooming into terms of saying that when you look at a situation, how do you first appreciate it entirely in your mind before you take the pen to paper?
Yeah.
How do you first, like, I'm sure you now realize this when you prepare structures for your jokes, right? I mean, people think, oh, joke marta hai, and there's no, I mean, I know what goes on in the background. I have a lot of friends in your industry. And in any case, it's a storytelling industry. So I understand storytelling very well.
Yeah.
And storytelling, so the structure that has to go into it, the pain that is taken and all of that. You can't just start, say, okay, chalo, joke likhte hain, and take a page and pen and sit down to it. Now, that these kind of lessons are what actually carry you through in life. Yes, of course, I'll admire Field Marshal Rommel, who was the greatest general, the Desert Fox, and all of that stuff. But I mean, what can I take away from him, which I can implement in my life Monday morning, is a little bit, sort of fuzzy and out there. But what I can learn from my CEOs, what I can learn from, the business colleagues I've worked with juniors I've worked with, I think those role models are perhaps more better teachers. So I don't think I've had any one. Of course, during phases of time, you'd say, yeah, this generals like General Sundarji, who are legendary. You'll always admire. Yeah, look at him, and he's a great. But you also know that that general is a one in a million. I mean, such generals come once in several decades. So you can look at him and admire him, but can you use him as a role model? When by definition they come only once in a few decades, can you really aspire to be someone like him? Perhaps not, but you can aspire to be a better leader by taking combination of qualities of several other leaders, right? I mean, I would take from, say, General Panag, his penchant for physical fitness and deep study of strategy and being a very clear-cut, outspoken person. From another general, I may take a ability of having more empathy towards people who are not necessarily as physically fit as him, who may have a different. So it could be a combination of various things. It need not be, and leaders aren't supposed to be perfect. Leaders are supposed to have flaws. Troops troops know that there is no person who is flawless. If a person pretends to be flawless, he is a hypocrite. And troops know that. So troops are comfortable with flawed leaders. They take pride in flawed leaders. They say to other Paltan jawans and all, "Hamara saab to thoda rangila hai." Ab hai rangila. And they accept that. You hai rangila thoda sa. But in other places, he's a great guy. That's the way to look at leadership, I think.
हाँ, पर ऐसा ही चाहिए. You don't want like somebody who's like completely this thing. You need a human being basically. It's interesting that you touched upon something that I thought was kind of interesting, which I learned as a comedian. With तो हमारे साथ क्या होता है कि जब मैं shows करता हूँ तो मेरे पहले कोई 2-3 लोग अपना opening act करते हैं, and sometimes you learn from them. Like I don't want to name them because they're too young, so I don't want to. There's a guy from Pune who just does a really different kind of set, like physically using his body and face, and it's really interesting to watch. And I saw this, I'm like, yeah, this is very interesting. ये सालों से मैंने इस्तेमाल नहीं किया है, that you have your whole body to use. Is an interesting bit of information. Or not only that, I've spoken about the story before that. I had a joke which was not a good joke, which is about reservations and some nonsensical joke ages back. And one opening act came to me and he said, "Bhai, this joke ki problem ye hai." And I was like, "You're absolutely correct." And I changed, I completely dropped the joke, stopped doing it. So my question to you is that whether in your life in the army or in your corporate structure, what are the lessons or something that you've learned from subordinates that you're like, yeah, ye to sahi bola hai.
All. I mean, firstly, I think one of the fundas that get cleared as soon as you join the army, and I think army is a great training ground in that way, you will realize that 50% of your learning will come from subordinates. Because technically they might be subordinates. Like when I joined the army, I was in my early 20s. In my platoon itself, they were like war veterans who already got wound medals in there. I remember seeing one of my JCOs who had a, scar running like this from here till here. And I was like transfixed by that scar. And he saw me looking at it and says, "Aap aur niche jata hai, dikhao." I was like, okay. Now if that man tells you something about battle, if that man tells you better keep your gun with you all the time, don't have it leaving around here, there, or whatever, you listen to him, because he may be technically a subordinate, but in terms of experience and all of that. By the way, in the armed forces, it is the havaldars and the naib subedars and subedars who kind of groom you in terms of saying this is right, this is not right, this is acceptable. You should not do these kind of things. Lessons they will teach you, simple lessons. कि साहब जो time बता, 3 चीजें आपको मैं सिखला रहा हूँ साहब, as a young officer. Time का हमेशा पाबंदी होना चाहिए. दूसरा, जवान की बात हमेशा सुननी चाहिए. तीसरा, कभी भी finance अपना जो है उससे बाहर नहीं. Now these are lessons which they have seen. Many of these JCOs I'm talking about, Subedar, they have seen generals when they were youngsters. So they are giving you advice which has been gleaned over, paid for in times of blood, with price of blood. So there is no concept, you are my junior, how can you teach? That funda is not there. It's absolutely not there. If you don't learn, you'll die. So to that extent, I've always found that it has got nothing to do with juniority, seniority, and in corporates as well. This is a fact that the people who are junior are usually the ones who are in direct touch with your customer. Every layer after that adds their own embellishments and covers their own asses and tries to, prevent bad news from getting right up to top, and they will do that. So this junior most person who probably has got contact directly with he's the man on the ground. Even in the army, the recce platoon commander is usually a young officer, a lieutenant or a captain. But when he comes back from the recce report, the army commander has to listen to him because he's the man who's been on ground. Everyone else is, satellite, map, image. But he is the guy who's gone there, measured the distance with his foot, felt the consistency of the soil under his heel, seen the bridge, whether it can take a tank or not. This is visual confirmation. So I think that aspect of learning has to be universal, 360 degrees. It cannot be, you have to learn from your critics, or like this guy who came here and told you, hey, joke chalega nahi boss. Right? Now, it could be, think about it. It could be that maybe that guy's way of displaying his displeasure might have been unpalatable to you. He might have been, "Bade sala kaisa joke marta hai." It could have been that. But the fact is that the underlying message was still true. Now, if you chose that, oh, how dare he talk to me like this? He's a junior to me or whatever. You will not get that learning. No? So I think it is from all aspects. And I know, and I'm, by the way, when I'm preaching this to you, it's not like I've been able to follow it all throughout. Anything that I'm stating in this session with you, I don't want the audience to think that I have mastered it. No, I am not. At times I also get irritated. At times these things happen. But I'm saying that if you have an attitude where you're open to people telling you what's wrong with you, or what's wrong with what you're doing, or you could do this better, you'll probably have a much faster growth curve as a human being. Forget about as a leader. Or if you are somebody, there's something here in your cheek, and you go violent on it, then no one will tell you that there is something here. You'll walk around life with these things all over your face. It's as simple as that.
You got to be open to feedback and things. It's very, very interesting. Okay. Again, please keep asking questions, and I will keep trying to ask them. I have a lot of questions of my own, but I will give sort of you guys the prerogative here. Again, if you're watching, we're up to about 550 people watching right now. So please, let's up it up to about 1,000. Like Toklo, etc. All those wonderful things that you can do with your time. Okay, we have another question from Teerth P, who says, in your corporate experience, do you think the most brilliant managers / founders traits are inborn or nurtured?
That's a quintessential question. Many people have tried to answer it, and of course there is a camp which says that you have to be born with it. You have to be born a Bill Gates, and I think it's three parts. One, of course, there is something called the lottery of life. There is no doubt about it. So if you're born in a family that can afford education, if you had good nutrition as a child, and if you had exposure to, so a lot of people who admire Bill Gates and the amazing stuff he's done should actually read his biography. If you read his biography, you'll realize he was probably one kid or maybe two kids in the entire United States who had access to computers like mainframes when he was a really small kid. He had parents who encouraged him. He had an environment which was very, very conducive to him learning computing and coding skills at a very early stage. Now, the point is that, yes, there is a certain 30%, which is the environment in which you're born, the lottery of life that you win, which is everything. You could be a genius in studies, but if your father dies and you have to take care of the family by becoming an employee, which is the story of many, many, many million Indians, then yes, that is a 30% failure there. The second, of course, is the drive of the person. There is no doubt about it. The person can be smart, genius, but that drive, the passion to say, "Karna hai, boss." I mean, you look at your industry, look at the Bollywood. In Bollywood, the people on top are not necessarily the best actors or the actresses. They are not necessarily the best talented people, but they definitely, many of them are the best driven people. They will keep at it again and again and again, and practice a move again and again and again. And I think that famous story between, I'm not a cricket fan, I know, sacrilege to say that, but especially now. But the story that goes between the drive of someone like a Sachin Tendulkar versus Vinod Kamble, both of whom were equally talented, but one person would always come to the practice nets. I mean, at least that's the urban legend. Practice nets, half an hour before, and the other one would saunter in because he was a star. I think the second element is definitely drive. So, and third, of course, is serendipity. I believe a lot in serendipity because there are elements far beyond your control, and that lottery of life and all of these things, they do involve a certain amount of serendipity. But I don't think leadership is an inborn trait. That is absolutely not true. And I think an easy way to understand is not to confuse leadership with that textbook description that we are taught in B schools. That is not leadership. Leadership is that 17-year-old boy who was playing cricket with you till yesterday, and today his father died in an accident, and that 17-year-old boy has grown into a 25-year-old man who says, "Yaar, boss, kal se I will not be able to go to college. Naukri, baap ka wo business sambhalna hai, ye karna hai." Suddenly, overnight, he has that maturity in his eyes. You don't see that kid in anymore. That's leadership. Leadership is a guy who's working as a housekeeping staff in some office who comes 1 hour before the office opens. And with that 18,000 rupees salary is putting 2 children through English medium school education. If one of his child gets dengue, the price of the injection is the same as your child getting dengue. Price of milk is the same for him as is for you. So a person who's managing that in 18,000 rupees and yet giving you your morning tea in a happy way, smiling way, I think that's also leadership. So I think if we start looking for, nahi, wo, jab tak wo Jack Welch type ka nahi hai, tab tak wo leader nahi hai, that's a very myopic and it's like saying that until I hear this brand of jokes, he's not a comedian. That's silly, right? So I think that's why the looking for leadership traits or leadership qualities, is one of the factors which actually makes you a leader. It's definitely not inborn skill. I doubt whether anything inborn is. You can have maybe a skill like somebody who's really good in mathematics or really good in physical strength, but in leadership, I don't think that's possible.
Yeah, I mean, 2 points that you covered upon, which is the Joy Bhattacharya came here, who's a cricket expert, and he spoke about how the cricketers you always want to look out for is the people who have a point to prove. And that point to prove mentality either is self-induced or induced by your socio-cultural environments, which I always find very interesting. And that's always the person you're sort of waiting to see. And the second but it's always, every time you meet somebody from even my industry, the entertainment industry and stuff like that, you meet some of them and you hear the schedule. It's ridiculous how much these people are working. Like 4.5 घंटा दिन में तुम सो रहे हो और बाकी टाइम, हाँ ठीक है, लोग बोल रहे हैं कि भाई बॉडी बनाते रहते हो और कुछ नहीं करते, पर वो भी काम है. So whatever it is. And the other thing was the coincidental part, which is I remember reading Malcolm Gladwell's Tipping Point, which spoke about how the year of birth of, I think, 3 of the biggest Silicon Valley leaders is roughly the same, and it happened.
He mentioned that in The Outlier.
In The Outlier, that's the one. Yeah. See, you know way more than I do.
I'm just telling you, The Outlier basically talks about these kind of aspects.
Yeah.
That, if you're born in the month of June, July, so basically it talks about the construct that how your lottery is kind of made by the month you're born.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, the book begins by saying that every year, millions of children will be born malnourished. And every year, this month keeps changing because these are the mothers who are fasting during Ramzan. Right.
Oh.
So, I mean, that's how the book begins. So that's in Outliers.
Yeah, Outliers was a great book, but good fun book to read if you want. Okay, we have Sorabh Bandopadhyay, who has a question about the armed forces. He asks, sir, any insights on how to improve self for SSB?
That's a good question. I get asked that a hell of a lot of times. I got asked that so many times that when I was in Reliance, what we did was we had many officers in Reliance. Reliance has more than, I think, 1,000 officers if you put all of them together, Navy, Army, CRPF, and all put together. So we created a series. It's there on YouTube. If you just Google Reliance plus SSB, you will find it, in which we got the officers who have been through the SSB, each one giving a 2 to 3 minute tip. Some people spoke about how do you interact, how do you behave, what do you do. And we also had in that series 2 GTOs. GTOs are the people who actually do the selection in SSB. So even they give out that. Just go through it and you will get a fairly good comprehensive understanding of what you can glean from the wisdom of so many people who have been through it, and they're sharing 1, 2, 2, 3 tips with you.
Super.
Reliance GPS plus SSB.
Oh yeah, I got it. I already found it. It's right here. This is the
Put the link
channel. I will
out.
just put it
Yeah.
right now in
Yeah.
the chat window. So please go ahead and watch that. Again, I'm sure one of my mods can also check it out. This is the SSB Reliance videos. So please go ahead and do that. Teerth P is full of questions. Teerth P is a champ today. Uh, Anish Matthew says Saurabh looking overwhelmed by the amount of quality words coming from the other side. Always happy. Great work bringing Captain Raghu Raman. What clarity of thought, so salute. I actually have a question about clarity of thought and what you mentioned earlier about the assignment that was given to you to write with the fountain pen. Whenever I watch your talks, and whether it's your Josh talks or TED or whatever it is, and in a TED talk or whatever talk you're giving, there's always that clock counter under the thing which says how many minutes to go. And I have multiple times seen people completely like 12 minute baki wo 4 ghante extra kar rahe, and I think yours ended 15 seconds prior, like absolute with great precision. So I'm actually curious because something that I'm also trying to figure out about the economy of words and how you plan any of your speeches and what the process for that would be.
So yeah, there is a process. I mean, let's not, and I think part of that does come from the background of military training, where you say that if you've been given a 10-minute slot, then you must finish at 9:55, so that 5 seconds buffer is there in case something happens. So you do that, and that's, by the way, existential requirement in the forces. Simple reason, I'll explain to you why. If you have been told that you have to assault that peak at 6 o'clock, and before your assault, the Indian Air Force will come and strafe that place and bombard that place, like smash it up. And immediately at 5:59, they'll end their strafing run. And at 6, you have to begin the attack. If you're off by 4 or 5 minutes, your boys and you will get strafed. It's as simple as that. So that is the reason why military has so much of precision. It's not because they are, anal about it. There is an existential requirement in battle for that. So I think when I prepare for anything, whether it's an assignment, whether it's, I spend a lot of time thinking first. I don't start jotting down. Or so suppose I'm doing a talk. Let's say I'm doing a talk on, I did one called Diversity is the New Nationality, in which I wanted to speak about the fact that diversity is our strength. And I'm not saying it because, oh, nice, fluffy thing to have, but existentially, it is our strength. If we remove that, then we become much weaker, which is true in companies as well. A lot of companies do this hiring of different people, gender, different, thinking that annual report mein acha lagega and all that. That's not true. A company that has got diversity in thinking is a company that will always be more innovative and more creative, because there is, as the definition goes, diversity in thinking. Now, if I want to leave the audience with the message that this is existential and these are the reasons why we have to do it, just like a joke. In a joke, you have a setup, you do a setup, and then you take it to a climax, and then there is a punch, which basically brings a 3-act. It's a 3-act act. It's a 3-act art. Of course, you may have 4 acts, 5 acts, but it's a structured art. Similarly, when you are communicating with somebody, you have to first explain what is the problem. You have to show what is the impact of this problem on you. And if you allowed status quo to continue, what could be the impact, what you will lose. You have to show the solution, and then you have to give proof of that solution working. And finally, you have to give a call for action. Acha, to tumne kya karna hai? What do you have to do? Once you structure this piece, then you have to say that, let me build this in terms of narratives, in terms of stories, because stories will stick, statistics won't. If I tell you about child trafficking happening in India and women, girl, child traffic, 50,000 got trafficked last year. Year before that, it was 48,000. I'm overwhelmed. If I tell you the story of one girl and tell you the trauma that she goes through, it's something that you will relate with. It will stay with you. And then, of course, there is no escaping from rehearsals. You have to rehearse. You have to rehearse. Now, many times people see, and it happens sometimes, not very often, but sometimes it does happen that just before I'm entering into the session or something, they give me, okay, fine, I have a look at the script and I go and do it. And a lot of people say, "Arey sir, aap to ek nazar maar ke bol dete ho," and all that. That has come after 10,000 hours of practice. It's not in the beginning. In the beginning, you have to have the clarity. You have to use mnemonics. You have to use, like one of the tricks, by the way, I learned from your industry, which is when you are speaking, and you have points to talk about, you keep sipping water in between. And the reason why I keep sipping water now, I don't do it. I used to do it at one point of time because I needed to, because my next speaking point is kept on the table there. It's written on the table. So just like your jokes are kept on the table, and that's one of the reasons why, Seinfeld and many of the other, Robin Williams, are famous for it. He'd keep going and drinking water because that's where the jokes would be written. So you have to use all of those techniques to remember communication of any sort is like an art form. You are leaving your audience watching a play, watching a story. And if the audience needs to be convinced that it was extempore and you used a mechanism, which is to jot it down, it's like a puppet show. Everybody knows in a puppet show, strings are used. Nobody is saying, oh, tum cheating kar raha hai, tum dhaga use. Nobody says that, right? So in an art form, rehearsals are important, and rehearsals are the only way to get to, matter of fact, I once did a talk, I remember, in BITS Pilani. And that talk was titled Z-Kit Bag. It's a framework for thinking. Now, that framework, I narrate the framework and I repeat the framework. And I say, because of this framework, this talk stops bang with 1 minute to spare. And then I turn that clock. Now, the point is that this act of writing the C language in C language, or writing that presentation in the principles of the presentation, enhances that last minute turn of that laptop to show that I've finished this with 1 minute to spare because I have used these frameworks, makes the audience want to follow the framework, which is your end goal. Your end goal is to make sure that your call for action is actually taken up. So yeah, so firstly, you must have very clearly what is it that you want, and always try and do one takeaway to the audience, 1 or 2 takeaways. If you confuse them, these are the 18 things you need to remember to sort out your life. They won't remember anything. So leave them with 1, maximum 2 takeaway points. Leave them with anecdotes that will remind them of those points, not with statistics, anecdotes. Make sure that your audience is invested in that girl's story I'm telling by giving her a name, giving her an age, describing her, making that girl appear. So make the audience invest in your story and rehearse. You have to rehearse. If you don't rehearse, then it is the ultimate insult you pay to the audience by audience, organizers, and the next speaker, by extending the time that you were supposed to have done your job in. I think it proves that, I mean, when the history of the world, there's a talk called History of the World in TED, which is 18 minutes.
Yeah.
If history of the world can be told in 18 minutes, I'm pretty sure your business plan can be told in 18 minutes. So I think that's why it works that way.
It's the very interesting thing actually to try and so if somebody tells me that, hey, listen, you have a 10-minute slot, I aim for 7, because I realize कि यार laughter वगैरह वो सब, I mean, expectation ये है कि laughter तो आएगा eventually कहीं ना कहीं, तो you plan it that you'd rather be short than go overtime, which is always. But yeah, the rehearsal aspect is very interesting to me, because like I think like comedians, we tend to do a lot of shows. And like you'll do a show for 15 लोग आए, जैसे आज रात को मैं शो कर रहा हूँ, 15 लोग आ रहे हैं उसके लिए, which is intentional because again social distancing and everything, but you do about 100 of those till the bit is ready. And the self-recording, I mean, this is just random advice to anybody, is that record it on the audio and listen it to it later, and it's just such a simple thing to do. Okay, we have lots of questions coming in specifically about joining the army. Before that, I have a question for you, which is that about serving in Angola for the United Nations. Now, I'm not sure how many Indians are aware of how many Indian soldiers are sort of working in Africa specifically. Like I remember reading the story about this one lady. I've forgotten her name. Her surname was Panda, I think, where she was when South Sudan got independence or whatever. I think she was one of the officers post that with the violence and all. So I would love to know what that experience, that entire experience, was like in Angola, and also about generally the Indian armed forces in Africa, and what purpose it serves, not only with regard to keeping peace, but also I'm sure there's political sides to it. So if you could just.
So first, I think, if you want to understand the whole thing, we have to go to the backdrop that the Indian armed forces have been deployed all over the world to keep peace, to fight wars, I mean, it's from the First and the Second World War, the Indian subcontinent. When I say Indian subcontinent, I include all the way from, almost Afghanistan up to Burma. has contributed troops. I think the Commonwealth, we contributed more troops than the twice number of the troops than the standing Indian Army today. Even post independence, the Indian troops have been taking. So in the UN missions, there are three ways in which the soldiers are brought in of any country, not just of India. One is what is called the staff officers. Remember, if you're a country like Sierra Leone or Ethiopia or Congo or Angola, you're war torn and there are no administrative officers, there are no teachers, there are no doctors. So you need a set of planners to come and actually raise the city from scratch. To water source, where is electricity, get the electricity running first, then we'll open the schools, food supplies, this, that, coordinating the rations and all. So the first, or there's no first, second, third, but one category is what we call staff officers. These are staff officers. Usually they are majors and colonels and above. You can have some younger ones also, but these are people who are meant to basically supplant the governance of that country. The second are military observers. That's a different category. This category of officers tasking is basically to ensure that the reconciliation that has been, or the accords that have been signed, they are being honored. So for example, the mission I was in was called the UNAVAM 3, which is United Nations Angola Verification Mission. It's to verify that the accord has been followed. And it was called 3 because there were 2 missions before that. It was continuing, UNAVAM 1, UNAVAM 2, and it would continue. The last component is what is called blue helmets. Blue helmets are basically contingents of soldiers who are armed and they have weapons. The staff officers are not armed. The military observers may be armed for personal protection, but they are not expected to get into combat. They're observers. But the blue helmets have to take part in operations if the need be so. And in the past, Indian troops have taken part in Somalia. We've even had casualties. In several other places, there have been casualties. There have also been gallantry awards being given in UN peacekeeping missions in the past. So India, I won't be able to tell you exactly how many if we total up. I'm sure it's there in some Wikipedia site, but India has been one of the largest contributor of troops to the UN missions. And there are many reasons for that. One of the truth is that usually it will be the third world countries' armies who will be in a position to take casualties to a certain extent. First world armies are fairly reluctant in that regard, and plus the first world armies may not have that much of interest in Africa. Their interest may be most in Eastern Europe, and so you'll see their troops going to maybe NATO missions in Yugoslavia and stuff like that, may not go to the Africa. I think it has 2-3 purposes. One, of course, I believe it exposes the Indian Army to many other armies of the world. And it's a two-way traffic that we learn from other armies of the world, and other armies also are, but our Indian Army guys are, because it is true that Indian Army is usually handed over the more tough assignments. And equally, we must say the Pakistani Army as well. So we can't discount the fact that this subcontinent soldiers are considered to be, hardy soldiers and adaptable, resourceful. And in Africa, the local DNA also fits in, because unlike, and I'm just giving you an extreme example, so don't take it literally. Unlike, let's say, the US Marines arriving into an area and cordoning off the whole damn place and saying, this lane now belongs to us, and taking the main area of the town, which was the central part of the town, and declaring that to be the US bastion, and now everyone has to stay away. The Indian and the Asian troops understand the concept of the Gaon Buda. They understand, okay, there is a hierarchy. You have to treat the village headman with respect. You can't say, buddy, hell, move there. That young 18-year-old boys can't be ordering around 40-year-old people. There has to be a sense of respect and all of that stuff. So because of that, our ability to maneuver, because see, in UN missions, you very rarely are going to pit strength against strength. So as a company commander in, say, quartering area, it's called a quartering area, where the rebels are quartered. After they have signed an accord, they're quartered there. Quartering area has got something like about 20,000 rebels and their families. Your entire contingent is 140 troops. With 140 troops, what are you going to do with 20,000? But it is that whole aura that we are United Nations. We wear the blue helmet. We are representing the UN. So that, I think, is much more a maneuvering war. It's not a law and order enforcement with force. So that's in a nutshell. We at any given point in time have a brigade which is earmarked for UN missions and kept ready, of course in India, but kept ready for being deployed. The UN missions, Indian troops have got very, very high regard. I mean, there are specific requests that come during UN missions that we need INDBAT, as it's known. The Indian battalions are known as INDBAT. The INDBATs are required for extremely sensitive areas. It's usually the INDBAT that is deployed there. And of course, many of our officers have officered the United Nations efforts in many, many areas. General Satish Nambiar has been a force commander. We've had deputy force commanders in many countries. So it's a well-regarded army in that sense, even in the United Nations.
So okay, you spoke about it was very interesting about the third world and all. I was reading this book called Army and Nation, which was again recommended by I think somebody from the armed forces, which spoke essentially about the difference between India and Pakistan and how the precedence in India is about the government and then all the different branches of government. Whereas in Pakistan, the assumption this book carried was that it's the other way around, where the army is the top.
Right.
Yeah. So how true do you think that is, and what do you think is the difference between, say, and this could apply to pretty much across the world. It doesn't have to apply only to India versus Pakistan. Like, do you cite any other examples across the world about something like that?
So just like when you say a human's behavior, when he's an adult, is shaped completely by the experience as a childhood, as a child. The same is true for nations, right? So we discussed a few minutes ago, that when India and Pakistan are partitioning, you have to put yourself into the shoes of that chaos happening at that point of time. All communication is going by wireless, this, that. Nation is being divided overnight. I mean, you see a company being divided into two and you see the carnage. People don't know, yaar, is mahine ki tankha yahan se aayegi, wahan se aayegi, chutti kaun hai, mera boss kya hai. This chaos is happening now. Entire resources are being divided, and then armies are being there. Battalions that were divided, two companies staying back in India, two companies going to Pakistan, regiments that were torn asunder, the bureaucracy is being broken into pieces and all of that. Now, willy-nilly, what happened was the entire freedom movement of India, which resulted also in the birth of Pakistan, was largely championed by political leaders who were based in India. They were India-based. And also a lot of institutions which are required for governance, whether it's the IAS Academy, all of these things, the railways training school, the bureaucrat training school, this, that, Indian Military Academy, National Defense Academy, they were all in the Indian mainland. And one of the institutions which was in Pakistan was the Staff College, which was in Quetta. Staff College is when officers come to a certain seniority, they come up to a major and then colonel level rank, they're being trained to command battalions. Also remember that Pakistan was kind of a surprise at the end of this whole thing. I mean, people of the Indian subcontinent were expecting freedom, but they were not expecting partition. So when partition happened, even the Pakistani fledgling state was much more fledgling than India, because not only were they 1/3 the size of India, they also have nightmare of administration, because one part of their country is here, the other part of their country is 3,000 kilometers on the other side, completely different, Bengali speaking, this, that. It was totally chaotic. And in that chaos, the political leader of the country died within a year and a half. Jinnah died within a year, I think few months more than after partition. So there was a leadership vacuum. And remember, the leaders of the freedom movement, including people like Frontier Gandhi, including people who were from the Northwest province area, they were more Indian. And so therefore that vacuum was filled in by the military. Because remember, at the end of during the partition, the only machinery that was working as a well-oiled machine in both the countries to a certain extent was the armed forces. They had just fought the Second World War. Second World War had just ended, and the troops were still under command and control. They were still fresh from battle experience. Their entire communication system, signal system, everything was still like it was a hot army which was still cooling off. And they were a very, very efficient organization. And in the absence of any other political center of gravity in Pakistan, the army takes over. And of course, once the army takes over in any country, what happens is that, so for example, the army is to Pakistan what the civil services is to India. So if you're a young aspiring citizen of Pakistan, you would aspire to join the more powerful organization in your country. Stands to reason, right? I mean, let me put it to you another way, then you will understand where I'm coming from. Every society will get the leaders of the society from the profession where the cream join. So during our independence struggle, it's not a coincidence that most of our independence leaders were lawyers, because law was a subject that they could study. The rich, the people who could afford to go abroad, the cream of the society could go and study law and be exposed and could argue law, could advocate for the case. And that is why you see the entire the dominance of the freedom fighters, many of them, of course, or other leaders post the partition came from the field of law. So similarly in Pakistan, what happens is, if I am an aspiring young man and I want to join what is equivalent of civil services in India, it's the Pakistani army, because the Pakistani army not just does the army business, they do many other businesses also. They administer, they run bakeries, they run banks, they have their own budgets, and their officers are appointed on deputation as district magistrates, and when they retire, they get lots of land and all of that stuff. So like any cream of a society which basically looks after themselves, this cream also looks after themselves. Now, the challenge it poses for India is actually very unique, because we, being a democracy, cannot really communicate in equal partnership with their democracy, because their democracy is not. So when their home secretary has a discussion with our home secretary, and let's say he promises, I will do ABCD, he has no locus standi to promise, because the actual home secretary is some general. So he'll have to go back and take permission. वो ऐसा बोले थे उनके जनाब, नहीं ये नहीं होगा. Then he has to come back again and all of this. This is not a dialogue between equals. At the same time, being a democracy, you cannot give legitimacy to the army by saying we will do a talk with army, right? So we are in that conundrum with Pakistan, and of course, the biggest sufferer of this entire game theory is the Pakistani citizen, average Pakistani citizen, because you have this 800-pound gorilla in Pakistan, the Pakistani army, which keeps saying, everybody, India is going to sort you out, India is going to sort you out, India is going to sort you out, and therefore has a locus standi to grab a disproportionate power or a disproportionate part of the country's GDP for its own use. So interestingly, for India, the strategic game plan, if you were to really look at it strategically, would be to assure the Pakistanis that, hey, listen, we have no interest in conquering you. We have bigger things to do. We need to go to 5 trillion. We are aspiring to become like, we have no, this thing that we will bring you into our fold, and we want to either jo hai wo nahi sambhal raha hai kaam, we'll bring more into it. If they are convinced and the people there start realizing, which they do realize. It's not that people don't realize. I mean, Pakistan has got a huge, if you study their demography, they've got a huge separation between the have and the have-nots. I mean, in many ways, I mean, we are in the same boat to that extent. So I think if we had a way to communicate that in the end, we are not interested, and therefore the locus standi of the Pakistani army reduces in the Pakistani polity, my sense is that would be but obviously in more tactical terms, it's much more jingoistic. It's much more, we'll attack you, you will attack us, and all of that, which really doesn't solve no wars are won like this. In the end, no wars end. So the only way to end a war is actually to broker peace. There is no way to end a war with war. That doesn't ever happen, because whoever loses will always be smarting, will always feel that I've got a wrong deal, will always feel that, I'm slighted, my honor is taken away, and all of that, and they will hit back. They may not hit back today because they are weak, but 5 years, 10 years, 7 years later, they will hit back. So it has to be brokered. That's the only way.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you say that about that it has to be peace. And I was reading this other book by Mr. A.S. Dulat, who's written a book called Kashmir: The Vajpayee Years, and he speaks about how even though like every time India attempts to make any dialogue with Pakistan or vice versa, if a premier does this, there's invariably something going to happen. Is that the sense in the army that as soon as there is an attempted dialogue, and again the book argues, and I think pretty successfully, that which multiple people have said also, which is that there's no other solution barring dialogue and peace. So but
So there is,
yeah.
I mean, there is, it's like a statement that they say that in the end everyone will die. I mean, there is no solution to that. In the end, everyone will die. So the point is, what is the alternate to war? It cannot be more war, no?
Yeah.
And what is the alternate to war? It's peace. And how do you arrive at peace? You don't arrive at peace at war, by war. You have to arrive at peace by dialogue. There is no other. So it's a fait accompli. This is sentence semantic. It's a fait accompli that if you have to achieve peace, you have to do it with dialogue, because you can't say, "Buddy, we'll sign this peace accord and put a gun on it." You know, he'll sign it because he's scared of you at that point. फिर बाद में जाकर resistance करेगा, बम फोड़ेगा, ये करेगा, वो करेगा. He'll do that. So peace is the only way. Now, like I told you, in this whole game, there are 4 stakeholders in this game. There is the Indian political establishment, the Indian people. There is the Pakistani political establishment and the Pakistani people. The joker in the pack is the Pakistani army. Now, Pakistani army is the most dominant organization within Pakistan, and it sees no reason to give up that dominance. Why would they give it up? Why would one day the Pakistani army say, you know what, we should be subjugated by the civilians and let the civilians take over and we will go? Of course, they will try that once in a while. One chief might come who is not very interested and say, "Theek hai, tum log jo karna karte raho," and all that. Another chief will come, no, I want to be the CEO. He'll become the CEO and all of that. But by and large, the fact that Pakistan has always been ruled, influenced by the military is very, very evident from 2 or 3 examples. When the Pakistani Prime Minister is trying to broker a historic peace with the Indian Prime Minister, which will, in a sense, put the Pakistani military back into the barracks. Because if the accord is signed with India that India will not do any attack or something written, given, there, sealed, then what's the locus standi of keeping this, so many corps of the army raised in condition and buying new planes and buying new tanks? Not required. We also need to understand this as India, by the way. Every time we cheer when a Rafale comes, that is 450 crores which should have gone into building hospitals, schools, inoculation of children, education, hygiene, bridges, more things that could have been built with that 400 crores, which is now not only not going to get built, but this 400 crore plane will require a lot more servicing, accessories, pilot training, this, that. So it's a black hole which is now sort of suctioning in resources. So I'm not saying we should not have Rafale. Of course, we should have Rafales. But we should know what is the cost that is being paid. I think Indian citizens should realize that there is a 100 rupee note. That 100 rupee note, you have to give a part of it for defense, part of it for education, part of it for hygiene, part of it for hunger, because people will die. You may build a IIT which will produce engineers 7 years down the line, but if you don't pay the wages over here, they will die. So this balance has to be kept all the time. So each time we cheer, when we put more of our resources into the defense budget, we need to be aware that this defense budget is not coming from some third party. It is coming from within the same pie, and therefore some other budget is being reduced. It may be, welfare related or infrastructure related, but it's being reduced. So similarly for Pakistan, the situation is that a large part of their GDP goes into the Pakistani army, and that would have stopped. And therefore, Pakistan would have had a much more stable democracy in the years to come. And democracies usually realize that fighting between each other is futile, because in the end, the political, wars cost a lot of money, and it puts the countries back economically. So you can only sort of glean votes for the war with that jingoism for a little while, because when the economic realities come and hit you, Churchill, who was the great wartime leader of Great Britain, was picked up and thrown out by the British as soon as the war ended. So that was thwarted by Pervez Musharraf himself, and there are recordings of him thwarting it. So that is one. Second example is when the Prime Minister of a country sacks his army chief, who is still in midair. And by the time the plane lands, the keys of the country are handed over to him, and Prime Minister is now in exile. Very clearly show you where the center of gravity lies. So in that country, the center of gravity does lie with the army. And that is a unique situation we are faced with, where both the countries who are our adversaries have a sort of a military dominance in their scheme of things. And the only way, I don't know about China, but the only way with Pakistan is to convince the Pakistani population that India has no hegemonistic designs over you. And please, buddy, go and sort out your own country first, sort out your army, and try and get back your country from them. And we will sort of stay away from you. But obviously, for the Pakistani military, that narrative will not run, which is why they keep fingering in Kashmir. They'll keep, for a very low investment from their side. I mean, what must it be costing a few 20, 30, 50 crores per year in terms of total investment. They are keeping one of the largest armies of the world, sort of tied down in Kashmir. So from their strategy, it is working. That's the reality of the situation.
Wow, that's very interesting. I still, the image of holding a gun against somebody's head and saying "peace karte hai" is just it's a hilarious situation. So, how much time do you have? How much time do you have?
I have time. We can continue for another half an hour.
Superb. Sounds awesome. A lot of questions popping. That's why I just thought I'll ask. Okay. We have a lot of questions coming in once more. Akash Singh says, great. At least someone from the army said this. Akash Singh says, Raghu Raman sir, respect, etc. Rohan Noval says, sir, as an ex-officer, you're more than aware about Kashmir's problems. So as per you, what should be the best way to end the Kashmir's chaos once and for all? Do you think that this like most sort of places that are involved in something like this, which includes Kashmir or whatever it is, it's not like there is a once and for all. Is there a once and for all?
I don't think there's a once and for all, but the good news is that all conflicts eventually end. All conflicts. Right. Yeah. Right? So whether you have the Irish Republican, the LTT, this, that, all terrorist movements and all conflicts end. There is no doubt about that. Eventually they end. Of course, you have 100 years war, which ended. That's why it's called the 100 years war, because it ended. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The point is, how can we hasten that? How do we hasten that? Now, you remember one thing, that it's a utopian concept that countries will be at peace with each other. Countries, even countries which are not at war, the US and Mexico, they have a lot of strife between each other. We have a lot of relationships with abrasions that take place, and just like two neighbors. When two neighbors are living, they'll always be, uska ball aake shisha tod diya, ye ho gaya, wo ho gaya. They'll be at a superficial level, there'll be camaraderie, but there'll be bitching happening at home. But if she dries her clothes outside, all of these things will happen. So like that, even at a country level, they will be. Now, Kashmir is a very unique situation, which in one party, to stay relevant in their own country, has to keep igniting that aspect. I genuinely don't think, my personal belief, that a country like Pakistan, or for that matter, any country in that terrain, anyone who's seen the terrain, any military man who's seen that terrain, will ever imagine that by sheer force you will be able to occupy the area of Kashmir and take over Kashmir. I don't think, anybody who even writes that in an appreciation in a military paper as a major would be sacked as a major. If you don't know this, let's not even talk ahead. Obviously, there has to be the narrative that Pakistan will say that we will free entire Kashmir and we will do that, and that's the ultimate goal and all of that stuff. They also know it ain't happening. But like I said, for them to remain relevant, they will constantly keep creating local issues there, and terrorism will happen, bombs will explode, they'll keep influxing. Now, the answer to that actually from the Indian side is to demonstrate. So the average Kashmiri, to my mind, is just caught in the conflict. On one side, you have the law enforcement from the Indian law enforcement and the Indian army. The other side, you have these gun-toting terrorists who will enter inside your village and, and of course, increasingly maybe a feeling of alienation that, we are alienated from the mainland and all of that stuff. I think the greatest thing that India should do, could have done, should do now is basically to ensure that an average Kashmiri realizes that being part of the mainstream India is actually much, much more beneficial to me economically and also from a dignity point of view. It's not just economics, it's also dignity. If that is somehow managed, then there is no way that insurgency can foster in an area where people are fundamentally against the insurgency. There is always insurgency, unlike terrorist attacks, cannot survive without local support. There has to be some sort of local support, whether the local support is voluntary or coerced, but there has to be local support. And I think the real solution lies in, of course, firstly, addressing the core issue, which is Pakistan. And when I say addressing the core issue, it is, you cannot address Pakistan by sheer kinetic power. And that, firstly, those days are gone. Secondly, now definitely you can't do anything with Pakistan unilaterally with China sitting on the eastern border. You move one division here, he'll move two divisions there. But you're a checkmate. No. So you can't. So eventually it has to be by dialogue and resolution. There is no other way. We can't get bombastic about such. If it happens, no, on the court all the time, you go to fight a case. मैं इसको case लड़ूंगा. ये कहते हैं lawyer tell you boss 10 साल लग जाएगा तेरे को. Why don't you settle it out? And okay, you don't get exactly what you wanted, but you get something out of it, and you have face saving, and you settle it down. The point really is that, do we as a nation think tactically or do we think strategically? If we think strategically, we'll be thinking 20 years down the line and envisioning that if North and South Vietnam can, if Germany can, East and West Germany can combine, if Germany and France can get into such close cooperation. I don't know if you're aware of this, that many Israeli citizens look for a second citizenship. A lot of them do. Okay. Because they still have that fear in their head, and a lot of them do. One of the countries which offers the maximum number of citizenships to Israeli citizens is Germany. Now, I can understand Germans giving citizenship because there is a guilt complex, कि हमने genocide वगैरह किया था and all that. But what explains Israelis flocking towards Germany? Now, if that kind of a reconciliation can happen in face of a certified genocide of 6 million Jews, this partition was created by the British artificially 70 years ago. I mean, otherwise we have existed for millennia. We have existed before the state of Great Britain. We have existed before them. So I think strategically looking, a person would look that way, and look at it in a reconciliatory way, not in a way we'll capture everything. Nobody can capture anything. That notion, if anyone has, they need to discount it, because you might be the most powerful man in India, but you still have only 15 lakh troops. Your army size is still 15 lakhs. And with 15 lakhs, you can only do so much. You cannot, this may be the fourth largest army in the world, but it's not an unending army. It has its limitations, and it has its resource capabilities, and there are already committed troops in various areas, whether it's in the Northeast or in Kashmir. These are committed troops. You can't pull them out from there for some other duties and all of that. Both sides realize it. I think there's a realization. If we think tactically, then we'll keep looking at scorecard. Then they did this. This year, they killed 400 of us. We killed 483 of theirs. So it becomes like a cricket match. But neither side is solving the problem. The problem is not getting solved. Yes, you're kicking the can and saying, okay, but agle talk, we'll fix it in the next talk and all, but you're really not solving the problem. So I think strategically, to solve this, there has to be stability in Pakistan. There has to be cohesiveness amongst Pakistanis to realize that, yes, we need to declaw the military and put them back. There needs to be that strategic vision in India that, yes, eventually coalescing with Pakistan will serve our purpose. There also has to be the world which allows you to do that. Of course, there are many countries. China, why would it want a unified India and Pakistan?
Yeah.
If China wants to be the big boy in the neighborhood, he knows if these two countries combine their combined resources, and the wasteful expenditure, which they'll not do now in defense. Obviously, now the combined expenditures of defense will be only against one adversary, which is China. So China would not want that. No superpower in the country wants another emerging superpower. So they'll do what it takes to make sure there is some, a good way to understand this is to know that the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council are the 5 largest exporters of arms and weaponry. So it's a bit like saying कि वो हलवाई की जो दुकान है वो डायबिटीज के लिए क्योर के लिए फंडिंग देगा. क्यों देगा भाइयों? Why would he say that I will shut down my Boeing industry, my arms industry, joblessness in my country, so that these two countries will have peace and progress? So I think we have to understand that when we want to write our strategic destiny, it has to be written by us, because only we are 100% invested in our agenda. Everyone else has got their own agenda. So even a US, when he is helping us, he has his own agenda. When US is helping Pakistan also, why is he fond of Pakistan as a terrorist? Osama bin Laden वहाँ मिला था उनको, but they know that if we have to keep an eye on, Afghanistan and Saudi Arabia, and why not a check on India also? If India needs to keep coming back to us, hey sir, हमको ये दे दो, missile दे दो, ये दे दो, वो दे दो, then Pakistan needs to be a little bit of a bad boy in the block. So I think we need to understand that, and for that you require to think in decades, not in next election cycle. then it won't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's basically you need to start thinking a little bit more like China. It's the way
Actually, that's
because they plan. Yeah,
that's
yeah,
much deeper than what you think.
yeah.
Chinese think in terms of horizons. You know, there was a famous statement, I'm forgetting the exact phrase, when a Chinese premier was asked about something that was a major movement that happened, you know, some 100 years and whatever. He says, too short a time to say. It's only 100 years.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because that's the vision they have. They have a vision of a China 20 years down the line, 30 years down the line. And that's the only way to win a strategic battle.
Makes sense. We have a couple of questions coming in. Again, smash the like button. Let's get to 1,000 likes because we are just about, I think, 10 short of that. So let's go for that. This again, as I said, I'm taking a lot of questions. There was a question that came in. I can't find the question right now, but I think it just got buried in all the super chat. Somebody asked a question about did you resolve what was your meeting with Tariq Fatah? That's is that his name? Tariq Fatah?
Yeah, I interviewed him once. I was a
Okay.
interviewer, but I don't think there was any. I don't know what the question is referring to.
I'm going to try and if somebody, Manav, if you can try and find from the super chat what the question exactly was, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Anyway, we'll take a few more chats coming in, which are on the super chats. Chinmay Sardesai says, when Pak army chief are profiting from pizza outlets in US and stuff like that, how does Pakistani people not stand up and see the hypocrisy of their army? I mean, listen, for civilians to see the hypocrisy of anything takes quite some time. Let's
So
let's not
it's
talk about
almost
one
being said
country.
as if Indians don't tolerate hypocrisy.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, we are तो very like हम तो बहुत
तो call out कर देते हैं.
हाँ, yeah. Sachin Nayak says, but thanks for your question, Chinmay. I appreciate it. Sachin Nayak asks, just yesterday I was watching 5 lesson Army Teaches You in Life by Captain. Great video. Again, if one of the mods can put the link to the video, please do that. Such a good podcast. This turned out to be so much insights. Thanks, Sorabh. Happy Republic Day to all. Republic Day to you too, Sachin Nayak. I hope you have a good one. Gaurav K says, firstly, happy Republic Day, Captain and Sorabh. Please share your first-hand experiences at Siachen. Jai Hind. You've spoken about this quite a few times. I mean, if you'd like to share it again, I'm always happy to hear it. But yeah.
I actually haven't shared my experience of Siachen that much in sessions. There is a piece that I wrote. It's called The Rope. I'll see if Shardul can send it to you or whatever. Or it is there on my website. If you go to my website, you will find it. And I think that was my sort of, I wrote it immediately after coming back from Siachen. So it still had that rawness of the experience there. I think there's enough being said about Siachen in various different programs and all of that for me to repeat it here again and again. But I would just like to sort of emphasize, and this is more for my, brother officers, sisters, and so many Jawans who are serving in the Indian Army, that Siachen is a tough place, but there are many, many other tough places also. Siachen just happens to be a brand that is much better known, but there are many other places where, if you actually look at the logistics supply chain, it is worse than Siachen because they don't have the logistics supply chain there. And by the way, this deployment which is now happening in the China border, it's no less, sort of tough. It's going to be a very Siachen is tough, but so is serving in the desert in 50-degree temperature.
Yeah.
So is it being inside a submarine, which is leaking from everywhere and all of that, and it's a metal tube. One valve fails and you are done. So it is being in a combat air patrol at 35,000 feet, where some engine failure. There's a pilot who has just been awarded the gallantry award. You should read up about how during a refueling what could go wrong. So I think this aspect about many people, and this is, by the way, not just the army. Let me be very clear. There are many organizations like the border road organizations, the porters who do the logistics, the locals, the Bakarwals, the local tribesmen of Kashmir, of those valleys and all of that, who have an interest, not just as a normal citizen, but to help the army and all of that. By the way, the Kargil intrusion was not detected by some sophisticated aerial satellite, and by the Bakarwals. They came and said, "Ki sir, wo Pakistani kuch log aage baith gaye," and all of that stuff. So it's a whole combination, right? It's a combination of people who is going through very, very tough situations. So I was there for a year, which is the normal posting that, and I know many people who have been there several times. So instead of talking about my experience, and as a very unique experience, I think there's a lot which is already out there. But the point I would like to underscore is Siachen is that VIP magnet and a media magnet, but there are many other places which are equally, if not tougher than Siachen, where troops are serving right now.
Yeah, the I don't know whose book I was reading about the shepherds are all fighting in incursions, and I was like, wow, this is quite interesting.
It's existential for them. It's in 1962, sorry,
Yeah,
65.
that's
When
the
the
one, right?
parties attempted it, they thought that they will get a lot of local support, and they didn't. As a matter of fact, they were called out, and they were, in many cases, the local villagers caught hold of them and handed them over to the Indian army.
By the way, there's a lot of questions coming in specifically about Pakistan and about all the rest of the. I think because everybody, we all constantly we read all these stories, and there is very little like clarity for us because it's just screaming journalists as opposed to experts like you. So I think a lot of questions are coming in with regard to that. Aditya Srivastav says, "Hello, sir. Do you think Pak is is a terrorist state? And military manage each things, and why we don't expose them?" And Musharraf has said on record that we created Taliban, and even Imran Khan said the same. Your view? I'm not really aware of this. Did they say that?
So,
I
I
don't
mean,
remember.
somewhere you have to understand one fundamental thing. The
Hmm.
fundamental thing is that terror is a weapon of war.
Right.
A weapon of war. Like nuclear missile is a weapon of war. A bow and arrow is a weapon of war. A tank is a weapon of war. Terror is a weapon of war. Right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Now, Japan cannot say, "Yeah, tum yaar nuclear bomb mat dalo. Yeah, this is not fair. Yeah, we don't have nuclear bomb. You're a nuclear state."
Huh,
US will
huh,
say, "Yeah, we are nuclear state, by the way. Guess what? Not
yeah.
one, two bombs. Boom, boom.
Huh.
So if a country utilizes terror as a weapon, there is no use whining to UN, Mama, he is using terrorism, but you should stop fighting at 5 o'clock in the evening and we will blow a horn and we'll go back home and come back." No, because a country that realizes that they are 1/6 of your economy, now maybe 1/10 of your economy, their army does
Right.
not have the resources that you have. They don't have strategic depth. Understand that.
Yeah.
Pakistan, if you see as a sliver of land, doesn't have the strategic depth that India has. You've got places in Visakhapatnam and your Audi factories, tank factories there, nobody can reach till there. But Pakistan is fearful each time you poise along the border and go behind in Kabul because they are getting, that we are getting surrounded. So their reaction is very understandable. Understand one thing. If you want to learn strategy, I mean, this is, if you want to do jingoism, then there are other channels you can go to where you will be convinced that you are the only patriot and all other countries, people are not patriots. Well, Sri Lankan is not patriotic about Sri Lanka. Nepalese is not patriotic about Nepal, whatever. Only Indians are patriotic. It's not like that. Firstly, you can hate the enemy. There's no, caveat on that. But you can't disrespect the enemy. You can't say कि बेवकूफ है, ये Charlie है. Why? I mean, you have to ask this question. I mean, ask yourself this question: that if you think that Pakistan is very weak state, why the hell is he taking a panga with someone who's 10 times larger than him? Again and again and again and again and again. Why is he doing it? Where does that body gumption come from? Where does the strength come from? Will you do that? If you say have a neighbor who's 10 times stronger than you, will you go keep fingering him on a day? Then you'll come back and again you'll go and there has to be a reason. Never ever believe that your adversary is unreasonable. If you ever read a newspaper which says unprovoked, unreasonable enemy, that's wrong. I'm not referring to Pakistan alone. Even if you're running a business and someone comes and tells you, "Sir, wo customer bewkoof hai, sir." So that's why he's not buying our product and buying the other. He's not aware, sir. That is why he's doing that. I say, but guess who is not aware? Because everybody will be aware of their interests and will act on their self-interests. The key is for us to discover how may we enter into that person's thinking loop. And once we have entered into that person's thinking loop, present that. So if you say Pakistan is always jittery about India, it is maybe understandable because we are the 4th largest army in the world and we are next to them. And we also do, stuff with Afghanistan in Kabul. So they get a sense that we are getting surrounded from behind. And now if we understand that, we'll be able to understand their reaction. If we label them as unreasonable, then you cannot plan any strategy, no? How can you plan a strategy? Have you played chess, Sorabh?
I mean, I'm really amazingly terrible at chess. I
Doesn't
play
matter.
reverse
You know
chess,
the
yeah,
rules of
but I
chess.
know the rules. Yeah, yeah,
You know the
yeah.
rules of chess.
Yeah.
So suppose you and I sit and play chess. I have to assume that you are reasonable. That's why you have made a move. It may be a wrong move, but you are reasonable. But suppose you start doing like this with chess. Then you say, "वाह, जिसको chess नहीं आता है, कैरम खेल रहा है, कुछ और खेल रहा है यहाँ पे," right? Now, if you say that they are constantly fueling terrorism in Kashmir, despite whatever you try, you do surgical strike, this, and you do this against, and you go and complain to the US, they still send, you expose them. What expose them? I mean, how much more exposure do you want? Osama bin Laden was found inside Pakistan next to their military academy. इससे ज़्यादा आप क्या exposure करोगे? What will you go and expose? कि देखो देखो ये यहाँ पे बैठा हुआ है. They are okay with that. They say okay fine, we are exposed, big deal. We will deny. We will say कि हमें पता ही नहीं था. So terror is a weapon in their arsenal. You have to understand that your adversary is fully allowed to use the weapons in their arsenal, and they will. Now you can say in the UN that terror is bad, and so are landmines, so is nuclear radiation. All of these are bad. There's a ban on landmines, but landmines are still planted. There's a moratorium on nuclear tests. Nuclear tests are still carried out. The United Nations says that no, you can't invade countries. The US goes and invades whoever it wants. So this is the reality. This is the real politic of the world. The real politic of the world is not working on that, at sunrise we'll blow the horn and sunset we'll call a close to the day. Terrorism is going to be a weapon that an inferior adversary will use always. There's nothing new. By the way, what do you think the Indian freedom struggle was? What do you think Bhagat Singh did when he bombed the cars? When political or even British officers were assassinated? What was that? Why do you think Rajguru was hanged? On what charge was he hanged? So these are all perspectives that you see from one side to the other side. You can fume about it. You can get angry about it. But if you want to resolve it, you have to recognize that terror is a weapon which will be used in war. Now, how you declaw terror is a different story altogether. That you can do by making sure local population does not support them, by building fences, by giving strong sort of reprisals each time such attack happen. But you cannot say you can't use terror. No. Terror use is not allowed. You can't say that. That won't happen. I mean, you can say it as long as you want, like we have been saying for decades, but it's not going to solve the problem. I mean, the guy on the other side is having a laugh because he knows with an investment of maybe 20-30 crores, he's got you pumping down thousands of crores into the valley. Why would he stop that? Why would he stop it?
Wow. Yeah, that's a very interesting insight. I think we have another question from Anirudh Agnihotri, roughly in the same zone, which says, how credible are the claims that Indian security forces have violated human rights in Kashmir? I know it's a very tedious job and beyond my comprehension what goes on there. I'm just curious.
I think the Indian Army has a very, very creditable record of human rights. I know the moment I say this, there'll be a lot of people who will troll and who will say, "Okay, it's a bakwas and all of that." And this is true. It's a view, and I am not saying, and neither the Indian Army is saying this, by the way, that all of its soldiers have never ever committed an atrocity. That is not true. I want to tell you a macro view. In a macro view, in war, there will be unfairness, whether you like it or not. You have to be the man on the ground. If you are a soldier who is on ground with a rifle and you are looking at a convoy or vehicle coming, and you know that in this convoy any one of the jeeps could have an explosive inside it, your manner will be a little apprehensive, it will be a little afraid, and therefore a little belligerent. There is no denying that. There is no denying that. If you see an alert sounded even in an airport, a real alert sounded in an airport, you'll see the way the cop will treat you will be far more rougher because he's got apprehension and he's on an edge, he's trigger jumpy, all of those things are there. This is human nature. You can't. Now, will atrocities be committed in the course of duty? At times it will be. It is not necessarily deliberate. No army unit decides, oh, we are going to commit atrocities. It doesn't work like that. Matter of fact, human rights is one of the major issues in which a lot of officers know that they can get sealed in their career. So they go, out of their way to make sure whatever protocols have to be followed, they are followed and all of those things. Having said that, it is also an army which has an internal process which is fairly robust. Could it be better? Of course, everything could be better, but it is fairly robust. And I think we've had, especially by the way, because of advent of social media, because of the ability of somebody to take a video, this, that, and all over the world, the armies are coming right into focus, right into. I mean, a great example is that incident where a soldier tied up, an officer tied up a local on a jeep. It became an international incident. So I'm saying, even with this sense of awareness, there is a lot of pressure on troops and to be more humane, and to ensure human rights violations are not violated. But obviously, there can be nobody who can say that it will never happen or it has never happened. Very recently, we have had instances where court-martial proceedings have been initiated against officers, which in itself is very telling that an army chooses to show exemplary punishment to individuals who they believe have violated the code. So I would say that point number one, human rights cannot in a war zone be equated to a peace zone, because it is not in the control of their soldiers are also human beings. They will feel threatened, they will feel scared, they will feel angry. Second, I believe that the Indian Army's protocols and processes, and I deal with a lot of young officers. I know a lot of young officers are not very be-minded people. They are very good boys and girls who come from good middle-class values. They don't like to hurt people unnecessarily. They always have a sense of, let me help a person if I can help a person. The army, an inhumane army, did not need to go out of their way during the floods in the valley. You see, after all, when you're called to rescue somebody, you can hold back. No, if I hate that person, I'll let him drown. Why should I go out of my way to put my own life at risk? An inhumane army doesn't do that. A humane army will always make sure that they are trying to rescue as many people as possible, even losing lives in that process. It is that army which just a few years ago, when the floods came, actually carried people on their backs and pulled them out. The army is not transformed overnight. Yes, there will be instances. And yes, like any news item, and again, this is the way of the world, a bad news will usually be highlighted, and rightfully so, that even one instance of human rights violation should be penalized and should be highlighted. But we should not believe that that one instance sort of is the norm. That is not true. So it's so not true.
Okay, so there's your answer. That's your answer, Anirudh. I hope that satisfies your curiosity, because that was your question about curiosity. We'll just take two last questions. We are already approaching 1 o'clock, and I'm sure Sir has many things to achieve in life. Becoming the CEO of any other company in the next 2 hours is quite possible.
No, I'm done with that. I'm done with that.
Okay, we have. I'll take one more question. Okay, yeah, here's a question which came from Anirudh Venkatesh. This was the one about Tariq Fatah. Raghu sir, how convinced were you after your talk with Tariq Fatah? That was a question. I honestly don't even remember. I don't even.
I don't think I needed to be convinced or anything. This was a chat in which I was asked to host, or I actually be the person, sort of an anchor kind of thing to Tariq Fateh. Tariq Fateh has got some very radical views. He has his own fan club and his own hate club. And as I told you, I'm very neutral to. I'm always very curious to explore anybody's point of view, no matter how weird or doubt it may be, in my context, because I have found that I have changed my mind in not these kind of things, but I'll give you a personal life example. So I have a couple of friends who are very heavy into Vastu and all of that. And, and I had a colleague with me when I was in the government who was totally steeped into it, totally sunk into it. And at that point of time, I said, Pata nahi, we are in the 21st century and we are looking at artificial intelligence, and he is going back to Vastu and all of that. But over a period of time, when I studied the subject, I found the proof of it and many other instances, I changed my mind. Yes, there is something over here, and discovered there's a whole construct called Nagara Vastu, on the basis of which town planning is done. Because after all, your sewage cannot go into the next person's drinking water. You cannot erect a wall which stops the wind from going. Your house needs to have some parts of sunlight, some part of dampness in the same house. And all of this were the rules of Vastu. And that's how cities could be built along the bank of rivers. Otherwise, you couldn't build extended cities. So when you learn about something that, and then you change your mind and say, okay, fine. Sometimes you hear the view of a person which you don't fundamentally agree with, but you know where he's coming from. So, if I were to talk to a Pakistani and say, "Yaar, tum zara badi India ke, why do you hate us so much?" And he may go off into a tirade and he says that, you violated the deal and you did a different rule for Junagadh and a different rule for Kashmir. And, you keep threatening us by coming from behind in Kabul, and you do this and you do that, and you haven't been fair to us, and you split apart East Pakistan from us. And he may have a long laundry list of things that he feels that we have done on him. I may not agree with it, but I must know where he is coming from. So I know we are running short of time, but just as an illustration, I would urge our listeners to do one thing. If I take the name Shakuni, everybody recognizes him, right? He's the villain of the Mahabharata. Yeah. I would urge you, just in Wikipedia, you don't have to do any more history. Just go to Wikipedia and read the history of Shakuni. If you hear the backstory of Shakuni, you'll say, bloody hell, I now understand why he was doing this. You may not say I am in agreement with him, but you may why this chap was, in this khunnas with. And by the way, interestingly, just to give you a teaser, he has nothing against the Pandavas. Just a teaser for you. He has nothing against the Pandavas. He has no enmity against the Pandavas. He's just using the Pandavas to actually sort out the Kauravas. So if you know his backstory, you suddenly now. A villain about whom you thought he was a villain for years together, you read 5 minutes of his backstory and you suddenly say, shit, maybe I should reconsider. That's the reason why I talk to anybody. Obviously, if someone is abusive or something to me, then that's a different issue. But by and large, even if the person is saying, no, you don't know your facts and you don't know your history, it's okay. Educate me, inform me, and I'll do that.
Yeah. I completely agree. I mean, that's been one of the joys of doing this show is that I've at least attempted to talk, but yeah, to find people who are civil is also sometimes troublesome. Where people you disagree with who are also uncivil, you are like, yaar, मैं कोशिश कर रहा हूँ, तुम भी कर लो थोड़ा.
I have always found that when you are debating with somebody who loses civility, usually that person also loses the credibility of the point he's making.
Right. Yeah.
So if, though Tariq Patel didn't do that, I'm not saying that he did it, but if somebody were to become very, aggressive and this and that and all, I would look at him and say that, why do you need to bring aggression to support your point? It's only if your point is not, strong enough on its own. That's when you need to bring aggression. Otherwise, you would advocate with your, the logic of your points.
Agreed. Okay, this is the last final question, which is coming from Tirth P, who says how to develop mental toughness and anti-fragility. Wow, what a term. Anti-fragility is an interesting one. This is the last one. I know that. Just even a 30-second answer is good enough.
Mental toughness is like a mental willpower, or whatever you want to call it, is like a muscle. Very simply like a muscle. How do you develop a muscle? You have to exercise the muscle. So if you have to improve your stamina, you have to run every day you run, you increase your. Similarly, if you decide mental toughness, choose something that you find tough to resist, or choose something that you find tough to resist. Let's make up, you decide, don't let someone else, you lay down a goal for yourself that I will do this one tough thing every day and keep at it. And as you keep at it and you realize that I'm doing the second day, the third day, the fourth day, I haven't missed a single day in a month, a single day in 3 months, you are getting mentally tough. Yeah. There is no Red Bull which does it. So it has to be done. It's like a muscle. The only way to develop your shoulder muscles is to do shoulder exercise. There is no other way to develop it.
Sir, this has been an absolute delight. You've been very, very generous with your time. I sincerely appreciate it. I thoroughly enjoyed myself, and especially the last hour was just really insightful stuff where I'm like, "Arey, haan, ye bhi hai. Ye to acha point hai." So I thoroughly enjoyed myself. And if there's anything you'd like to tell people to do or to follow you, anything that you'd like to plug, please.
Well, I have a Twitter page, Twitter handle. So if you got any more questions, you can either, if it's a common question, you can ask it on the tweet. If it's a DM, my DM is open. You can ask me personally. And I look forward to seeing you again, Sorabh. And
I would love to talk to you.
And because this show was happening, I saw some of your other shows also.
I nice. Apologize. I apologize to all of them. Yeah.
I take your apology, but your guests were good. Okay.
Thank you so much. And your book, I didn't know you had a book, because I would have read the book and then we would have. So I'm going to read your book and then we'll talk again after that. Yeah, absolutely. I will put the link for Sir's Twitter account down there somewhere, and also lots of Josh Talks, TED Talks, a lot of fun things. Thank you, sir. Thanks so much, Captain Raghu Raman, for coming out. Much
Thanks, man.
appreciated.
Take care of yourself. All the very best, and happy
Thank you,
Republic
sir.
Day once again.
Thank you, sir. You can switch off your video. I'll just say goodbyes to people. Okay, thanks a lot for everybody who tuned in. I hope you guys had fun. I really thoroughly enjoyed that entire conversation. Akshay Iyer says, "Thank you, Captain, for your views," and that is sort of for bringing this mind for today's podcast. A lot of you guys, by the way, said that you'd love to see Sirs, and I totally was like, yes, absolutely must. So in the comments, constantly keep telling me who you would like me to talk to next. I am thoroughly open to ideas because. Yeah, as I think the end result of this whole thing is that we just have to keep talking, which is what I keep saying. Very important super chat is coming from Abhijit Singh, who has managed to give me, I don't know how, rupees 69.69. So I thoroughly appreciate कि तू चिल्लड़ भी दिया, मस्त है, बहुत अच्छा इंसान है तू, ये दिया. तुहिन बैनर्जी से अटैक ऑन टाइटन कब होगा? यार मैंने ऑनेस्टली ये सीजन 3 के बस 4 एपिसोड बाकी है, अभी तक बस 4 एपिसोड मैंने नहीं देखे हैं. टुडे टुमारो आई विल वॉच इट. आई हैव जस्ट बीन ड्राउनिंग अंडर अ लॉट ऑफ वर्क बिकॉज एक तो मैं ये चैनल कर रहा हूँ, फिर उसके ऊपर स्टैंड अप चालू है, फिर घर का जो तो थोड़ा बहुत काम रहता है आजकल, एंड ऑल्सो आई एम एडिटिंग वीडियोज फॉर द सेकंड चैनल. तो सारे जो वीडियोज वहां पर जा रहे हैं, दोज आई एम ओनली एडिटिंग राइट नाउ बिकॉज पैसा नहीं है. So just head to the second channel and check out all the videos out there. And again, please subscribe to the second channel. The reason is that I'm genuinely saying that 2 months down the line, I might shift all wake up content to that particular channel. We might start doing the lives there itself. तो काफी अच्छा कंटेंट है वहां पर. वहां भी मतलब 2 मिनट से लेके 22 मिनट की क्लिप्स हैं, जो जिन लोग को मतलब इतना टाइम नहीं है कि 2.5 घंटे की कॉन्वर्सेशन सुनने का. प्लीज हेड देयर एंड चेक इट आउट. Bhanu Kiran Reddy says, bring Ravi Ashwin. I would definitely love to bring Ravi Ashwin. Okay, just a last couple of things to say. I am on stage today in Mumbai. If you are in Mumbai, come see a live show. It's a really fun experience. I'll probably be performing for at least an hour and a half, maybe longer if you guys are into it. Small intimate gathering, about 15 people are going to be there. Tickets are sorabpanth.com, and the show is at 7 p.m. at this place called Huddlers, I think, in Chembur. Please check the details. I will be doing tours and shows now all over the place. Goa is on the horizon. Bangalore, I'm going to be coming. Delhi will definitely happen. And I think Calcutta and a bunch of other places will come. And Mumbai, I'm scheduling small 15-20 seater shows over the next month or so. So please coming out for that. And please get to our क्या बोलते हैं इसको, anchor.fm version for the podcast edition. That's about it, guys. I hope you guys had fun. Keep commenting and keep letting me know who you'd like to see next on the show. And oh wait, you know what? I got to read this. Okay, this is something I have to read because I just thought it was very interesting that this guy sent me this email. Okay, this is a very interesting Instagram DM that my manager has forwarded to me, which I thought would be worth reading. Okay, this is it. This is from Kailash on Instagram. Hi, Sorabh. So you've two monetized YouTube channels, one with memberships. Still, you ask for InstaMojo donations. Well, you don't ask directly, but you leave the link in the description and the lovely, kind people donate you. Well, as a senior comic, I don't think you must be struggling financially still. I guess you must have earned well by shows. So why do you ask for InstaMojo Super Chats membership? It's like the richer is getting more rich and poor is getting poorer. No, I don't know if this person is aware that there is a pandemic for the last 10 months. I don't know if you've been watching the news that there are not many shows happening over the last 10 months if you've been tuning in. And again, the thing is that it's very simple. The reason I put the link for the InstaMojo is because people ask me for it. A lot of people voluntarily want to give to the show, and that's absolutely fine. And I'm not getting richer, by the way. During this pandemic, I don't think anybody except probably people in retail and electronics have gotten richer, or मैं laptop नहीं बेचता. तो और या webcam भी नहीं बेचता मैं. So this entire InstaMojo thing is for people who actually want to donate, and I've asked multiple people. I've been asked by multiple people to put the link there. And in case, and by the way, this is a question that I'm sure some of you also have, which is that this show is a lot of work. It takes a lot of my time up. I thoroughly enjoy doing the show for you guys, and the format for podcasts globally, and this is for the US, for the UK, for Australia, wherever it is that initially for the first run, it is entirely based on keeping it running is on the basis of people watching or listening to it. And that's one of the reasons why that happens. So yeah, I mean, richer getting richer. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not like poorer getting poor, dude. Nobody who's like who's on the road lost their job is like, यार मेरा last का 100 रुपए है. You know what I'm going to do? मैं super chat देगा सौरभ को. मैं वड़ा पाव नहीं खाएगा. मैं मरेगा पर मैं सौरभ को super chat देगा. So I just want to say that there's a reason for all these things, and I'm not getting richer. It's been an interesting journey. And again, I understand that a lot of you might have this question, and that's again on days when we have sponsorship, I don't ask for Instamojo and PayPal unless people DM me asking for it, because I can sit and DM everybody. That's about it, man. Thanks a lot for your support. Before I go, I just want to mention you can support this show on Instamojo and PayPal. Okay, Kailash, you don't have to give it; other people do. That's all I'm saying. EMI बता दो इसको अपनी. हाँ, Akash Singh. Yeah. Richard, dude, there's been 2 months in this pandemic where I borrowed money. Just want to tell you that. I don't think you're aware कि हाँ मैं तो जाके बहुत ऑडिटोरियम बेच रहा है ना जाके लंदन में. क्या लोग हैं यार. राहुल चौधरी, सौरभ पंत इतना भी अमीर नहीं है. देखा जो लोग इस शो को रेगुलरली देखते हैं उनको मालूम है किसी कैसा चल रहा है लाइफ में. Pratima Agarwal is like, it's still going on. Yes, it's still going on this show. I just thought I'll bring up this comment because I thought it was funny. By the way, DM me on Instagram, send me tweets about just weird things that I can read out up top. I was going to read this up top because I thought it'll be much more fun to do that. And I completely understand that some of you may have these queries. I'm happy to answer all of them. That's about it, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for once again, Captain Raghu Raman. Follow him on Twitter and all those things. And thanks a lot to all my mods. Sharanya, Raghav, Devesh, Kajol Agarwal, और कोई है अखिल पिशुरोदी भी mod बन गया क्या ये कब हुआ? Everybody who's my mod. And Discord, my god, I have to do something on Discord. I haven't been on Discord in a week and a half. I will do something on Discord. I will do a radio show tomorrow. I am caught up, but the Attack on Titan thing will happen on the second channel, and I will do something on Discord this week itself. This is my promise to you, the Indian people. If you support the show on Instamojo and PayPal, okay, Kailash. That's all I want to say. Rahul Chaudhary says, bring more people from armed forces. I've got a lot of people from armed forces. Give your recommendations. I'll be happy to bring them. Tejas Kawale says, dude, this has the potential to be a whole series. This is, by the way, the third or fourth one I've done with somebody from the armed forces. The previous episodes, if you've not seen them, Lieutenant General Zamiruddin Shah was very interesting conversation, as was my conversation with Lieutenant General H.S. Panag. So you can go back and listen to those conversations or watch those conversations there. And in conclusion, what I want to tell you guys is that support us on Instamojo and PayPal. Thanks a lot, guys. I want to thank Instamojo and PayPal for keeping the show running. Instamojo and PayPal, greatest place. Oh, Dhanush. I said Dhanush's name. What are you talking about? Guys, I'll see you tonight in today's show. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Love you all. Goodbye. Take care. Marry me.